So what I did there, I'm hoping you got a sense of the scale, the size of these operations in terms of their financial impacts on their communities, how much money a farmer is dealing with in terms on an annual basis of, it doesn't take much for a farmer to be dealing with $500,000, $1 million in costs a year at all. So now you got a lot of this money you're putting in the ground or you're putting into cows and buildings. Let's look at returns. And so we're going to focus in on corn and soybeans. And these are, again, these Iowa State University budgets that go back over years. We're going back here in this slide to 1975, which is, a long time ago, all the way up to 2019 is where it ends. And these are the red line is the cost. And they come from those budgets I showed you, we looked at before, the middle one, the middle column through the years. So typical production and typical costs for an average farmer in that moderate, medium level of productivity. And then the green line is the average farm price during the year. They call it the marketing year average for corn. It starts in September and goes all the way to August of the next year. So we're just in the early October of 2020. We're just starting the 2020 marketing year, and it won't finish selling 2020 corn until August of 2021. So we got several months to go yet. So what you'll quickly see here is the red line is cost, the green line is the price, what they're getting. And so you see when the green line is above the red line, the farmer selling it for a price well above, in this example, above what they cost them to produce it. The other way around, and the red line's on top, that means the cost is higher than the price. So if you look here in the last few years, we've had a large gap in Iowa between what's it cost them to produce it and what they're getting for a price. But it's just after this period when we had some massive green line well above the red line, meaning they got large profits in those years. So you can see the costs were fairly stable, and then all of a sudden they started to rise. The price of corn shot way above that cost line, and then it collapsed. Prices are much more down to the 325, 350 range, and the costs are starting to really come down. It's taking a lot of work on it, and they've been losing money in the sense. And these are these opportunity costs as well as the direct costs. And so I'll talk more about that. Right now, I would say the margin is negative in there. And then the last year or so, it switched around. We actually made a little money in corn. These are the Iowa budgets now for soybeans. Same thing, 1975 to 2019. And you can see there's periods when the green is above the red. That means they're making money. Green is below the red. They're losing money. And what you'll see here is, again, the costs and everything shot up along with the prices. And now we've gone into this phase where the prices are coming down and the costs are coming down. But it's been negative margins where it costs them the red line to produce it, and they're only getting paid for the green line for producing it. So they are, especially the soybeans in Iowa, it's very much a case of losing money for each bushel they sell. These are the margins here. All I've done is take that gap between the red and green lines and put them in here. So you can see large margins for a while in corn and soybeans back here in the mid-2000s, a drop off in 2009, then shot right back up again. And now we've been in this extended period of negative margins, very similar to some periods back in the late 90s, early 2000s, the mid-80s. And then there's these good periods where the blue or the green line are well above zero, meaning they made money in those crops. So you see these cyclic nature and how there are extended periods of time where your farm might be in this not making money. You're spending $9 a bushel to produce soybeans and you're selling them for $8. You're spending $8 or $5 a bushel to produce corn and selling it for $4. Things like that. And these don't just happen for a little bit. It happens for long periods of time. Here's Illinois, the other major state that does corn and soybeans. So you think they have their money, their budgets figured out. Here's cash rent. So that's what they're paying for land. And these are the revenues they're getting. And so when they're above that green line, that's when they are making money, covering their costs of the land and their time. And that's what this money up here is for. And so you can quickly see orange is soybeans, blue is corn. Corn made some money back here in those years were well above the rental rates. And then the rental rates have come up after everyone's making money. So the rental rates come up. Now it's been on a slow decline. And you can see corn has been losing money for several years here since 2014 all the way up to the 2019 projection is a loss, not even covering the cost of rent. If you were renting the land or if it's an opportunity cost for you, you're growing corn and you would have been better off renting this land out. Soybean has done better in Illinois, and that's why they're a major soybean producer. They have higher yields, and a lot of these years have been breaking even, covering the land rent cost, but not in 2019. The projections were pretty poor. Looking now at dairy, these are from the, again, University of Illinois, but these are broader budgets, not just for the Illinois farmers. And they run a Farm Doc Daily is the webpage, and that's FDD up in the upper left-hand corner. The link's at the bottom. What I want to look at here is the pinkish fuchsia line is the operating costs. The red line is the total cost. So these are the variable costs, if you will. Feed is the big one, and then the rest of the stuff in there is other, or in the fuchsia line, the other things will be things like, building, running electricity, veterinary services, and things like that. Operating costs, cash ones primarily, not the things like depreciation, inventory, and stuff. The total cost will include things like the opportunity costs on the buildings and such like that, and the capital costs like interest and such. But what you'll see quickly here, and the green line is the returns, the prices they're receiving. And so the red line is the total cost, the green line is what they're getting paid. And you can quickly see it's only in this 1 year, 2014, was the green line above the cost line. And so you can see they've been having a very rough time here of not barely covering the costs all the way up through 2018. They do cover their cash costs in general, but not their, once you include all the non-cash costs, they're not covering them. So you can see it's been very tight in the dairy industry as well. So the main point of this whole section here is to show that farmers are commonly go through these periods when prices are below their costs, and then times when the prices are above their costs. Sometimes these periods can be quite long. You go back and look at that dairy one, there's been a long time there where they're barely ever getting above their total cost of production. A couple things I'd like to emphasize, though. These prices and costs are estimates of the averages. They're not what every farmer gets. I'll show you a slide in a second that shows you the wide amount of variability in costs. And the same thing with marketing. There's a large, just because the price of corn, the average is $3.50, doesn't mean every farmer gets $3.50. Some are getting much better prices on average. Some are doing much worse. Same thing with costs. If it says it costs you $3.25 to grow your corn, that's sort of an average cost, but some people are well above that, some people are well below that. So it's not what every farmer gets. These are the averages, industry averages. The other thing to note, excuse me, these are the full cost of production. They capture a lot of these non-cash costs and opportunity costs for land, labor, and management. So I like to think about, what does it mean when you're not covering all your non-cash costs? What this means, think of it this way, is that like depreciation is probably one of the larger non-cash costs on your machinery or your buildings. And so what it means is you get by for a whole year and you don't buy a new piece of equipment, but all your equipment has gone down in value. The price is below your cost of production. So what do? You don't spend money in machinery, but all your machinery gets a year older, wears and tears, and so it goes down in value, but you never actually have to write a check to somebody to pay for that cost of age on your machinery. That's a non-cash cost. And what that means is your buildings, your machinery all gets older and worn out, more used, more depreciated. And so that's one way they deal with not covering these non-cash costs. And you look at the picture of the dairy industry. We have the total cost and the cash operating costs. Part of that gap between them is these non-cash costs. I mean, you don't cover them. Eventually it catches up to you after a few years. It's like, machinery is just all broken. It's all worn out. I keep fixing it. I got to do something. I got to get a new piece of equipment to replace it. Same with your building. It's all worn out. I need to fix it. I've gotten by for several years not spending those cash costs, but eventually it catches up to you. What does it mean not to cover all your opportunity costs? What that means is your time is worth a certain amount of money and your land is worth a certain amount of money. You could rent out your land. You could take a job somewhere else. So a simple way to think of it is farmers work hard, put a lot of hours in. You could work, make up a number, say you work 50 hours a week on average across the whole year as a farmer, maybe even plenty of more than that. And you've worked that hard, that many hours, and you only make $25,000. You're not making your fair return on your time. And that's what it looks like to not cover your opportunity costs. You work really hard and you only get paid $25,000. If you'd taken a job and worked even at a simple retail store selling, a Quick Trip, selling gasoline, you can make more than that if you put in that many hours. That's what it means to not cover your opportunity costs. Same thing with land. You've got all this land, it's great land, you work really hard, you grow a great crop, and your returns, without including rent, are only $100 an acre. If you paid yourself $100 an acre, well, you could have rented it out for $200. So that's how you worked really hard and you didn't even cover your opportunity costs. That's what that looks like. Working really hard and not making a living wage, a fair wage, owning assets like land and not even covering what you could have rented them out for. The other thing I'd like to point out is these cycles. We've showed those corn and soybean ones. Those two tend to move together, but dairy, livestock tends to move opposite, or at least different than these crops, because livestock often use grain crops as feed. So when the price of grain goes up, livestock margins, don't catch up as fast. And these basically crops and livestock run in different cycles. But once in a while, these cycles all coincide. And that's what we've kind of seen these last few years here in agriculture. Before the pandemic, you saw corn and soybean prices low, dairy prices low, meat prices for livestock prices, beef and hogs were lowish. Other crops like cranberry were poor. Vegetable crops in the state were low prices based on, so all these cycles coincided. And we've seen that in the Wisconsin ag introduction there, where I talked about, we've seen some unprecedented levels of farm bankruptcy in the state. We've seen a large decrease in the number of dairies in the state. That rate of decline has accelerated. And what you see here are lots of signs of financial stress. And that's when over the long run, when you see these prices below the cost of production for these major commodities in an area, you see lots of signs of financial stress and even a crisis. So the last part I want to focus in is quickly show a couple things. Well, first off, show the variability. Talk about these prices below the cost of production. Well, that price these are all averages. This is from the University of Illinois. This is for 2006. And I'm only showing this old data to show you the variability. Back in 2006, I'm going back a few slides here. This is 2006. You can see corn, the average returns per acre were about upper 200, say like 275 an acre. And so what this is here is that average of 275 per acre, somewhere right in here. This is percent of corn. So this is corn following corn of 20%, rotating it 50%. Some of it's, let me say that again. This is the percent of corn in the rotation. So this is continuous corn, 100% corn following corn. 50% would be corn, then soybeans, corn, then soybeans, and 20% would be a whole bunch of other crops. And 1 out of 5 years, you plant corn. And you can see the clustering around the continuous corn to corn rotating with soybeans pretty much. And so this is a typical operation in here. And the average is 275 in that region, roughly, based off that other figure. But you can see some farmers were losing money in those years. You can see down here, several of them, the roughly 200-300 in this data set, were still losing money. The average is 275 an acre. They were losing money. And at the same time, 275, some people are pulling in 400. The average is in this region here, and so a lot of farmers are in there, but some are well above average in returns, and some are well below average in returns. And you see this all the time. Lots of variability in farmers, and I remember being in graduate school, the professor at the Iowa State University, who was Mike Duffy, he called it the rule of thirds. He said no matter what the year is like in terms of that margin that we've been looking at over the years, my rule of thumb, he says, about 1/3 of the farmers lose money, about 1/3 of the farmers break even, and about 1/3 of the farmers are well above their cost of production and make money. And so, 1/3 are negative margins, even in good years. About 1/3 are in that break-even range, and another 1/3 are making money, even in good years, even in bad years. Mark Stevenson, University of Wisconsin, on the dairy side, he uses about 20%. His are fifths. About a fifth were losing money, and about a fifth were making money. And that other 60% in the middle, or somewhere a little bit below, a little bit above. But he was using larger blocks, but he had those 20% up there. No matter how good it seems to be, they're still losing money. No matter how bad it seems to be, they're still making money. So you can kind of see there's a lot of variability in why each farmer needs to know their own cost of production.